the reason why I don't mind sharing my story about being a colon cancer survivor. I was dismissed over and over again. I am 5'2". I am, the right BMI. I do triathlons. I run. I walk into an office. I do not present as somebody who could possibly have colon cancer. So I think because we have this preconceived notion, which was right in another generation, it no longer is applicable. But in the generation I grew up, colon cancer is something that was more in the older male, overweight, poor lifestyle, was very prevalent in that demographic, per se. Young female who ate right and exercised, I really just didn't fall into that category. So unfortunately, I think because of people's bias or doctors' bias, I was very much dismissed. It was IBS, take out dairy, take out wheat, try to drink more fluids. You have hemorrhoids. I mean, I was dismissed with anything but why don't we explore deeper? And it was really frustrating. So I had always, not always, but slowly over time, I found it very hard to eat. Not, I'm always hungry and I always like a good meal, but I found it really hard to process food. Like things were just sitting in my gut. And it was starting to get really, really uncomfortable. I was like, then I just started to take out wheat and dairy and puree my foods. And I just started getting a real sense of this is not right. Yes, we all have intuition. And I think my intuition was like, this ain't going well, Babs. I started to become more and more lethargic. My energy level started to deplete. And again, I'm to blame in this capacity. I blamed it on, I had 3 kids. My youngest was 4 years old. She didn't enjoy sleeping. Sleeping was not in her jam. I was struggling in my marriage and balancing everything. It was a complicated time. I wouldn't call it difficult at all, actually. It was kind of just life. It was a chapter in my life. So being tired could have been chalked up to anything, but it was an exhaustion that the one thing in retrospect, when you ask that question, I had run the New York City Marathon in, actually I don't remember the year, but the kids were really young, maybe 2000, I don't remember, 2005 maybe. And then I ran the marathon 5 years later, in 2009. And I remember in 2009, I could not get the wind in my sails. Now, if anybody who's an exerciser that's listening to this, you know that when you first start working out, it's brutal. You're like, I am so winded and my lungs hurt and my heart hurts and my toenails hurt, everything hurts. You start working out, every piece of your body all of a sudden is speaking a language that you didn't even know. Like it's tough. But once you start building muscle and muscle memory and you get more conditioned, all of a sudden like that 3-mile run becomes very like easy. You're like, okay, I'm going to go out and run 3 miles. I have to tell you, throughout that entire training period, I kept waiting for that ease of I should be able to run 5 miles. I should be able to run 10 miles because I had been training. Never once did I hit that. Every run was so hard and I get it. I was training for a marathon, but I'm really just speaking to that like baseline. I'm like, they never hit that baseline. So there was that metrics of like, I don't, why am I not myself? And I really, I don't have, what went on back then. So I feel like I do. I'm right back to that space. Or if I work out, I build, muscle memory and stamina. I couldn't build that when my body was fighting cancer. One of the questions that I'm asked is, when did it first start? And there's just really, cancer is a slow growing beast. Some are more aggressive than others, but colon cancer is actually a very slow growing cancer. So I could never like officially say, well, it was around this time. It's just this like slow progression. You get used to it till when finally you're like, this is ridiculous. I can't eat anything. So yeah, it had been going on a long time and I had been I had been seeking medical help. But I am also one that I want to share because I am, a young mom. When somebody, well, I'm getting older. I'm 47 now and I'm young at heart. I don't know. I don't know what even I feel good, but, you know, I just think when I would go in to see these doctors and they'd be like, you're fine. I was like, great, I'm fine. I was very quick to take that answer. I was not very assertive or very confident in my own self-diagnosis. I had never seen anybody my age or any woman. I don't even actually I knew anybody with colon cancer except my father, who was labeled with colon cancer, but he really was actually labeled colon cancer stage 0. They found a mass that didn't show any cancerous cells, and it was more of a tumor in his intestines that they removed the same way they removed mine. But unfortunately for me, that I think I share because I think some people might be like me, and they might identify with what I'm saying, and this might resonate with them. As soon as she told me I was okay, I was like, oh, I'm okay. The doctor told me I'm okay. I checked I'm clearly okay. So a little bit of that is on me because I was like, wow, great. They said I was good, even though intrinsically I was like, yeah, no, this is not good. So what happened for me was I actually went to several doctors, and I did, because I went and pulled my reports after this whole experience. I had written down to my mainstream doctor that my father had colon cancer and it wasn't flagged. And it's really sad because then I went to an alternative doctor because I decided I needed some voodoo. I needed, off the beaten path, give me some supplements, give me, somebody help me. And she looked at me and she goes, you're 42 and your father had colon cancer? She's like, you needed a colonoscopy 2 years ago. And this is a woman who gives birth on shower curtains. And I'm not making that up. This woman gives birth on shower curtains in her own house. And she was like, no, you need a colonoscopy, pulls out her pad and pen and writes me a script for a colonoscopy. I couldn't get an appointment for 6 months. And they called me the week before this appointment. You have to meet the gastroenterologist first, and then they schedule the colonoscopy. So it could be a real long time. For some reason, gastroenterologists are really popular doctors. So I had struggled to even get that appointment. And then the week before, they're like, are you sure? Like almost as if like enough time had gone by, did my situation, work itself out? And I remember being like, yeah, I'd love to cancel. I don't really want to talk about this. I am in the middle of a divorce now. And I remember being like curmudgeoning. I could feel like energetically, I was like, yeah, of course I don't want to show up. But I was like, yeah, I'm coming in. Because I think like a higher power is like, Babs, you're not, you're going in. I show up and she pulls a scan that I had from 2010 or 2009. I think it was 2010. And what had happened was I was having such severe stomach pains that I actually passed out in front of my children and was taken by ambulance to the emergency room. She goes, you shouldn't have been discharged. Something's wrong. And I want you in for a colonoscopy tomorrow. And I was like, tomorrow? I'm like, I have 3 kids in 3 places. I'm in the middle of a disastrous marriage. I have pickups, and I had a tennis thing in Florida that weekend. And I was like, hard pass. You need to prep, and I'm not prepped. So that was a Wednesday, and that Monday I booked the colonoscopy, and it went from 0 to cuckoo in a really short amount of time. She called me. I had the colonoscopy on Monday. She was like, something's there. We tattooed it. We're going to send it off for pathology. You'll get the results in a couple days. She calls me and she's like, Barbara, can you talk to me right now? And she's like, the pathology came back and it's cancer. So she keeps talking. And I'm so in shock that by the time I drove home, which was, I live 1.5 miles away from my kids' elementary school, by the time I got home, I decided I did not have cancer, and it was precancerous, and it was cancer-y. And I, my husband, their father at the time, I called into my office and I was like, the gastroenterologist called and she thinks it's a little cancer-y. And he's like, oh, so that's not serious. I said, no, it's not serious. We're just gonna have to remove it with surgery. I mean, it's not a big deal. I literally, when I tell you the stress I was under was too much, that I was like, I can't have cancer right now because I just can't. My kids are too young. I'm too healthy and my marriage is a piece of garbage. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that cancer is not, we don't have time for that. So I'm going to take a pass. Anyway, so that was Wednesday. That Monday I'm at Sloan Kettering and the doctor is sitting there. They call me in. I'm still telling everybody it's a little cancer. I just have a little surgery. It's not anything serious. We're sitting with the doctor. He's asking me about my bathroom habits and all this stuff. And I put up my hand. I'm like, their father at the time was with me. And I was like, can you just leave? I don't really want to talk about this in front of him. And he leaves and the doctor looks at me and he's like, you know why you're at Sloan Kettering? And I was like, I don't know, I have to have surgery to remove something that's not supposed to be there. And he's like, honey, you've got colon cancer and you've got a long road ahead of you. And I was like, oh, like it was the first time I actually heard it and I started crying. You know, my emotions were all over the board. It's like life interrupted. I was, it was really shocking and scary. And I really wanted to talk to somebody who had colon cancer and I didn't have access to a single person. I did not know. You got to understand, my dad had what they labeled as colon cancer, but it wasn't, they were like, oh, we'll remove it in a month. It wasn't like this, it was just labeled that after the fact. Initially, it just was a tumor. So it wasn't like I could call him and be like, what lies ahead? We were obviously had different pathologies. So emotionally, I was really all over the place. And I knew everybody was waiting for I was slowly texting people. I am a phone person. I'm really friendly, but sometimes just how you need to communicate needs to be in your wheelhouse. I think everybody, I have to call everyone and I have to, there's no right or wrong. It is your diagnosis and it is your experience. And for me, I did not feel like dealing with the emotional wreckage on the other side of a phone or making a series of phone calls. I basically texted a handful of people that I felt were more like the gatekeepers. And I was like, and let them disseminate the information. And I had a lot of control over that because I was like, this is really not for the public. This is not, a Facebook post. I think once you have your diagnosis, I think it's a little bit easier dealing with facts, not fear. And when you don't have the facts because you're in the space of, I haven't gotten my surgery yet. I don't know the pathology. We don't know the stage. I don't know if I'm getting chemo. That to me was actually the hardest psychologically because I was like a ping pong ball, a yo-yo. So the lead up to the surgery, I didn't have a lot of people to talk to. I will say that my dad had the same surgery, but a different surgeon, and his process was different. I had, I think it's called the Da Vinci machine. And so mine was laparoscopically. So I had like 5 incisions on my abdomen that were very minimal. My dad was apprehensive to share his experience. He's like, look, I'm fine now. And yours is going to be a different surgery. And I don't know. I guess in retrospect, I didn't know what questions to ask. I was more, I don't know. This is the worst. You want to hear the worst part of the pre-surgery? Because I think, so you go through the day before or 2 days before surgery, you go into the hospital and you do a series of blood tests and all this stuff. Like you're on different floors and I don't know where I was. I was all over the place, all over Sloan Kettering, this floor, that. It's an all day. It's so exhausting. And then the last stage of it is they mark you for surgery. So you lift up your shirt and they're putting this black Sharpie that isn't going to wash off. And she's like, well, where do you wear your belts? And I was like, do I wear belts? I don't know. What she was saying is I could have a bag. I could have a bag attached to me for my waist. It's called an ileostomy bag or I'm messing up the words, but whatever it was, all I heard was a shit bag. I was like, what, you're marking me? You're literally marking me right now for a bag of poop. And I was like, literally, my marriage is done. I've just been diagnosed with cancer. I have 3 kids. My kids are 4 years old, 10 and 12. And now somebody is marking me for a poop bag. I am like, you can't, I cannot I cannot believe this. And I was like, well, what are the what do you mean? And where do you, I'm asking, I'm like, I don't understand. Am I going to wake up with a bag attached to me? And does the bag go back? Like, how does this bag work? And I am not, that one was a tough, that was a doozy. I was like, that one was a doozy. I'm not going to lie. So, I had those markings 2 days before my surgery, because then the next day after the marking day was a starvation day. Like, you don't eat that day either. And the surgery, I believe, was like 6 hours. What they do is mine was laparoscopic. Like I said, they have 5 incisions. I really don't know what goes on. I always say, like, because they took out a foot of my large intestine and 25 lymph nodes, and then they put the intestines back together. You make sure all the hose pieces, and there's no leaks, and there's no any, get the, whatever. So I guess they duct taped my intestines back together. They sent that off to pathology exactly 7 days after, because I got the results on my husband's birthday, December 11th. And they didn't call me until 3:30 in the afternoon. I knew I was getting a call that day, so I was waiting, and I went, again, you're a ping pong ball. You just go from cuckoo to cuckoo. You are fine. You are dying. You are fine. You are dying. And I was at home by then. So but it was, I believe it was Friday, December 11th. Because I remember, what if they don't call me today? Like, do they go home for the weekend? I could be wrong. Revisionist history is a whole, but I do. It was December 11th, and they called and they said, well, the good news is you won't lose your hair. And I was like, what? And I kind of knew it was going to nosedive from there. And they said, it had gone into the lymph nodes. It had perforated the intestinal wall, that it was a stage 3. And that's when I actually really felt, that's the first time I just really cried hard. I wouldn't say I cried hard until that point, because I think I just have a way of believing in staying an optimist. I'm an optimist, but it's my nature. I'm a very positive person. And it was the first time, like, my balloon had really been deflated. I wouldn't say my first time being deflated when my marriage failed. I think that was also a little puncture to the happy place that I like to stay in. But and I couldn't handle the rest. I actually handed the phone to my husband. He was all the way upstairs, and I was like, you better come down. This is not, these aren't the results I was hoping for. But fortunately, it wasn't a stage 4, but it was a stage 3. It had perforated the intestinal wall, which meant it was headed out to the mothership. And because it had already entered in a lymph node, that's not a good stage. That's not, it's not a great sign.
Right.
But colon cancer is highly curable. She said 6 months of chemo, and that I couldn't stop crying over that. I was like, I don't have 6 months. I don't have 6 months of chemo. I don't have the time for that. Your life gets hijacked. It's a real punch in the gut. Really, that was a doozy. That call really sucked. I was on oxaliplatin, which was my infusion. Now, I started on one thing, which was Folfox, and then I went to capecitabine. But it's hard for me because it was a while ago, and chemo does a number on your brain. I believe I went every 2 weeks for my infusions, because I think I had 12 rounds of you're supposed to do it for 12 rounds, 6 months, every 2 weeks. And I only would go in for one infusion. Like, the infusion would be several hours, and to say I was sick would be an understatement. All I know is that I had to do like 14 days, 7 days of a oral pill, and they were horrible. Everything was horrible. They have nothing. It was horrible. I hated chemo. I hated it. I thought, I had delusional expectations, because I would see people who had like lost their hair and other chemo treatments, like do yoga and soul cycle, and and I couldn't even drive a car. I was blinded with nausea. I could walk. I did a lot of walking through my chemo. I walked in the snow. It was my healing. It was my therapy. It was my everything. So, that's what I got through. It was 6 months. Brutal. It was brutal. I had neuropathy in my fingers, like that. I had this. So you'd have this thing where you have like shards of glass. If you drink something, it's the worst. It's like you take the drink and then shards of glass. You feel it's the worst. I still can't just, I actually don't drink cold water anymore. I don't like cold anything. I had this, I remember trying to go for a walk once with my friend Jill, and it was 2 days after my chemo treatments. And I could feel like my skin, there was something in my body. It was almost like the neuropathy that you have in your fingers, but it was all through I remember feeling it on my thighs and my legs, and my whole body just was like, it's like the poison was going everywhere. So my body felt so gross.
Some months passed after chemo, and then you got a scan to kind of see how your body was doing.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I went into that scan really optimistic. I will say I'm on year 4. And I'm no longer that person, unfortunately. Scans create a lot of anxiety for me. I've lost the ability to be my delusional optimist. I have a tough time with the scans. I will share that. As delusionally optimistic as I am, those scans throw me off my center every year. So year 3, they are very positive too, because they're like, you know what, if you get to year 3 and no markers of cancer, you have a higher probability of it not coming back. So that's positive. I try to be as positive as possible, but the truth is, like, I landed a stage 3 cancer diagnosis after a scan or after a pathology report. So I don't always have access to that anymore. It is a work in progress. And I think what I really like to share is you can't control that. You can only control what you can control. Keep the feet moving forward. I think being positive and being optimistic and taking control of what you can is super important. You control your thoughts and what you think about, and try to stay positive, because your thoughts dictate your actions, and your actions really do dictate, your future. And feeding your mind and your body with positivity and healthy nutrients, whether it's healthy thoughts or healthy food, it allows you to be in the driver's seat much more than anything else. And yes, there's a lot of things that are out of your control, but there are things that are in your control, and do your best to make good choices.